now we can actually talk about the college football playoffs. And yes, we're only halfway through the actual college football season, and it's far too early to actually look ahead and predict the matchups. I'm going to do so anyways. And I'm going to do so by looking at the top 10 teams right now. So we have Alabama, LSU, Clemson, and Ohio State University rounding up the top 4. The rest go Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Penn State, Notre Dame, Florida, Georgia. Notre Dame, Florida, and Georgia all have one loss. And we know that when it comes to the college football playoffs, you have to practically be undefeated. Otherwise, you have to have a really strong argument for why that one loss does not count or matter as much. In Notre Dame and Florida and Georgia's case, I really do not see that happening, so I'm eliminating them, leaving Alabama, LSU, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Penn State, who are all 6-0. That's 7 teams that are 6-0 that make the top 7. Now, for the last 4 years, Clemson and Alabama have been in the playoffs. Not necessarily 1 and 2, but have been in the playoffs. And that should be the exact same case this year. Now you can argue, you and I can argue that Clemson has a relatively easy schedule. They've only faced and will only face one top 25 team, one ranked team. And that so far has been Texas A&M, who they beat, but they don't have anyone else in their upcoming schedule that is ranked as of now. But it's hard for me to say that they are not going to be in the playoffs just because they go undefeated with an easy schedule. Mainly because the 3 of the other 7 are Big Ten teams that all will face each other. Aside from Wisconsin and Penn State, they will not face each other this season unless they match up in the Big Ten championship. And then you also have Alabama and LSU facing off against each other, where someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. So with all these teams playing against each other, aside from Oklahoma, it's hard for me to say that, Clemson, they'll go undefeated and they won't get in. It's hard for me to see that. It's possible, but unlikely. So that pretty much puts in Alabama, who is going to get in, and Clemson already in. So that leaves 5 other teams to fill in those last 2 spots. What also gets a team into the playoffs is going undefeated. It's going undefeated. And I think that the other team out of LSU, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Penn State is Oklahoma. They have already faced Texas, who is a ranked team, and as of now, they will face Baylor, who is also a ranked team, and they will win out. I think it's safe to say Oklahoma will most likely win out, including a win at Baylor, or against Baylor. So I think that puts Oklahoma right back into the playoffs like they have been for the past 2 years. Back in the playoffs. So that leaves Clemson, Oklahoma, and Alabama, given that Alabama beats LSU, which I think that they will, and I believe that they will. That leaves those 3 teams in the playoffs with one last spot left for LSU, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Penn State. 4 teams, 1 spot. I think that I'm going to eliminate Penn State from this because I think that their schedule doesn't really give them the best opportunity to get in. They play against Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State coming up. I think that Michigan's I think Michigan is going to be a bit tougher. If Michigan can hang with them, make it tough, I think Penn State slips down a bit, and I think that they outright lose to Ohio State. I think that really nips it in the bud for Penn State. So then it becomes a 3-team race for that final spot between Ohio State, Wisconsin, and LSU. And then for LSU, I think that they're going to lose against Alabama, and then I think that they win out. They have one of the tougher schedules. They've played against Texas, Florida, Auburn, Alabama. It's a tough schedule. So now it becomes, if they lose against Alabama, does their tough schedule and their sole loss being to Alabama justify them being into the playoffs? Maybe. But it depends on how the other games go. If they're really, really close, it's hard for me to see them go in. So that's why I'm going to say they're probably not going to go in. They're probably not going to make the playoffs. But if they beat Alabama, they're for sure going into the playoffs. And at that point, it becomes a question of whether. Actually, there is no question about it because then it becomes Clemson, Alabama, LSU, and Oklahoma. You can maybe make an argument if LSU beats Alabama, if Alabama should be in. They're probably going to be in. But this is all hypothetical. I think that Alabama's going to beat LSU. And I think that because of that, LSU is not going to be in the top 4. They will not be in the playoffs. So now it becomes between Ohio State and Wisconsin. It becomes between Ohio State and Wisconsin. And these two teams play against each other. And they can potentially play against each other again in the Big Ten Championship. So that's what makes this really, really, really interesting. And I feel like I can argue that Wisconsin can actually take that last spot. I know. Ha 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 ha. Wisconsin has not been relevant or good. They've been alright. They haven't been anywhere near the playoffs. And I get that. I understand that. But I can make the argument that they have a good shot. And this is not a hot take at all. That they have a good shot at getting into the playoffs, just sneaking in. Their first time starting quarterback, this is the first year that they started. He's a junior, Jack Cohen. He's been with the team for a while now, so he has that leadership. He has that familiarity in the locker room. He has a good connection with the wide receiving core. He already has that presence in the locker room. He's already a leader. And he does what needs to be done. He doesn't do anything complicated. His stat line is, I think, 1,117 yards. Don't quote me on that exact number, but it's definitely above 1,000. So it's in the 1,100s. With a 76.3% completion percentage, with 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. Now, that does not strike out as something huge, some Heisman stat. It's nothing crazy. But that's my point. It's nothing crazy. He protects the ball. Those 8 touchdowns and 1 interception is the key. With that 76.3% completion percentage, just to add on cherry on top, that's all key right there. That's key. Because he protects the ball. He protects the ball and just gives it to Jonathan Taylor. And Jonathan Taylor is a beast. He's putting up Heisman numbers. He is insane. He's crazy good. And then the Wisconsin defense as well is crazy good. They're extremely disciplined, don't get a whole bunch of flags or penalties. They've only allowed 4.83 points per game. And yes, that includes their game against Michigan. It's Michigan. Again, Michigan isn't really the pedestal that I'm putting it on. It isn't on the pedestal that I'm putting it on. It's really more like less than a stool, really. But you get my point. They have a solid defense. Their defense has scored as many touchdowns as they've given up, which is 4. Their defense has scored 4 touchdowns and has only given up 4 touchdowns. So they pretty much equalized it right there. And of course, Jonathan Taylor is a beast. On the other hand, Ohio State is great. I get that. They have Justin Fields. He's actually putting up Heisman numbers, unlike Jack Cohen. He's obviously great. But they lost a great head coach in Urban Meyer. After Nick Saban brought LSU to glory, and then he left. He brought them to glory. They had an okay season after that, and then he left. Les Miles didn't bring LSU to glory like that. No, it took some time. It took some time. For this example, Urban Meyer. He won 2 championships in Florida. 2 championships. And then he left. Florida didn't just come back to greatness out of the ashes. No, they went through a couple head coaches. And they finally are now, in a tiny bit after Urban Meyer left, but it took some time, finally got into the rankings. Because they were out of it for quite some time. They were at the bottom of it for quite some time. It takes time after a coach leaves for another program or just leaves in general, retires. It takes some time for that team to come to what it once was, to that rank that it once was, to the greatness that it once was. And I think that's going to be the case for Urban Meyer's what once was Urban Meyer's Ohio State University under Ryan Day. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some time. They're not going to be there this year. Next year or the year after that, they'll finally be back there. And so, with that in mind, I think that Wisconsin does actually have a really, really good shot at getting into the playoffs. Especially if they beat Ohio State. It's a big if, but if they do, they have a really, really good shot. So my prediction is Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, and then Wisconsin. I'm very confident in Alabama, Clemson, and Oklahoma making it. Wisconsin, I'm not at that level of confidence for Wisconsin, but I don't think it's a hot take. I think it's realistic. I think it can actually happen. I think that Wisconsin can do it. I believe that they can do it. The only other team that I can see getting into that last final fourth spot is LSU. That's really it. So I think it's either going to be Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, or Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, or LSU. And LSU. But I'm putting my money on that first one with Wisconsin. I think it's time that Wisconsin gets there.